Okay, so I switched the times of social studies and math today just because our social studies lesson is longer than our math one. And usually we do math for an hour, but we don't need an hour to do math. We need an hour for social studies today. So we just switched them. So social studies is happening now. And we're done with science stuff. We did our space units. We're done with science. The only thing that you can make up out of the space stuff is the last thing, the space test. So if on your message on Schoology, it's one of your missing assignments, that's the last thing you can make up for science for the year, actually. We're not doing science anymore at all this year. We're moving on to social studies because the last 4 or 5 weeks of school are going to be social studies instead of science. Because remember, the whole year we've been splitting it in half. Science the first half of the quarter, social studies the second half of the quarter. So the rest of the year will be social studies, no more science. We are going to be talking about the Middle Ages now, the Renaissance, the Reformation. There's a little bit of stuff about how they lived. We're going to talk about art and music and all that stuff from that time, some religion from that time. There's a lot of different things from that time period that we're going to talk about. But we're going to talk about the Middle Ages and how they lived today, right? So over on Google Classroom. No, not anymore. So over on Google Classroom, all the way down at social studies now, not science, skip all the science stuff. We are at life in the Middle Ages. So let's go ahead and open up the Google Slides, and then you can open up the PDF after. So you're going to use the readings to help you out with the Google Slides. So let's start by opening the Google Slides. And then you can zoom in however you need to. It looks like 50% zoom puts you at a good spot, right? So we're going to read through. I think what we're going to do is I'm going to read through the information and then give you guys the time to work on the slides. They're pretty explanatory. On slide number 1, you're doing definitions and what those words mean. Slide number 2 is the class system. So they have different classes like the poor, the middle class, the royals, stuff like that. Those are not the names for them. I don't remember the names, but that's what it means. Yeah. And then on slide number 3, let me finish. On slide number 3, who is whose vassal? So you will, first we'll read what a vassal is, and then you'll answer the questions. A knight is a vassal to who? Explain the relationship. A serf is a vassal to blank. Explain the relationship. Slide number 4 is the continuation of that. Slide number 3, and then slide number 5. We don't have groups, so you'll skip the part about groups, but give a brief summary of a skit. We're not actually going to present anything that would show how feudalism works. So we'll read about what feudalism is, and then you guys would make like a skit, right? Something that you would act out. We're not going to actually act it out, but you'll write a short little script about what you would act out if you had to describe what feudalism was. So let's go read through these. They're kind of long, so I want to go through them with you, read them with you, discuss things, and then I'll let you guys work on the slides. Make sense? Okay. Okay, these go in order of the class system, which helps you out with slide number 2. So we're going to read about a king first, which would be the highest person in the kingdom. And then we will read about the lords, which are underneath the kings. And then we will read about the knights who work for the lords. And then we will read about the serfs who work for everybody else, right? So it's the class system. Who has the most power in their stuff? So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit.
What about King Tut?
This is the Middle Ages. It doesn't have to do with Egypt. Yeah. All right. So life as a king under the feudal system. I'm going to take this off while I read because it's easier. Life is great at the top. Under feudalism, I rule over my manor, keep order, and provide protection to everyone beneath me. What's a manor? Any ideas?
Manners at the table?
No, not table manners. It's spelled differently. Nope, a manor is a castle. The manor is where they all live. The manor is the big castle that they all live in. So he ruled. No, let me stop. You guys stop talking. Let me explain things. The manor is where everybody lives. So the king is in charge of the manor. He keeps order and protects everyone that's underneath him that lives in the manor. Okay? So the manor is where they live. It's huge. Most of the land in my kingdom is mine. However, I do share some with the church. After all, since God chose me to rule, it is fair to return some of the land to him. Most people get confused when I tell them that God chose me to rule. I don't know why everyone around here knows about the divine right theory or the idea that God chooses the king. So it's not like here where we vote for president and they're in charge. This is like God chose this person, they are the king. Okay? Maintaining order in my empire is difficult. Very few of us kings can afford to have a personal army to protect our rich land and luxurious castles. So kings like me have to rely on others to help out. See, I'm reading it from the king's point of view. Yoshi, stop interrupting, please. See, in the feudal system, everyone has a you do this for me and I'll do this for you type of attitude. I do a favor for someone and they do a favor for me. For example, since I control vast amounts of land, I loan out large plots, like a plot of land. Those are called fiefs, to the people who are fairly wealthy but not quite as powerful as me. These people are nobles called the lords. In exchange, the lords promise to organize an army for me if I'm ever invaded. So you have the king at the top. He gives land to the lords or the nobles who help run his army. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Turner's drawing it out as I talk, which is awesome. I know, you probably think these people are my servants, right? Well, they kind of are. But in feudalism, everyone is a servant, except we don't call them servants, we call them vassals. There's one of your vocabulary words. A vassal is like a servant. So let's recap so far. I loan the fiefs, or parts of my land, to the lords, my vassals, my servants, to rule over as they see fit. In exchange, they must have an army ready to go if the manor is ever attacked. Got it so far? Okay, good. Okay, back up to the top. The lords live extravagant lives on the land. They have lavish parties, live in fabulous stone houses, or even small castles in some cases, and have very fine personal gardens. However, they owe me protection since I gave them land to rule over. How do they do it, you ask? Follow the next part closely because I'm going to say it once. This is a very controlling dude. They divide up the fief, so the land, into smaller sections, which they then loan out to the knights in exchange for serving in the army that they are in charge of assembling for the king. So the lords also have vassals or servants too. The knights are servants to the lords. I'm pretty sure that's what Mr. Turner was drawing to, right? Cool. It's hard to see from this angle what it is. Knights must be ready to fight almost instantly. It's only fair that they hold up their end of the deal, land for military service. So they have a place to live as long as they fight for the part of the kingdom that they are living in. But knights are busy. They don't have a lot of time to work on their land, to grow food, or do anything besides train to fight. I bet you're wondering how they, or any of us, get food. Finally, the most miserable of all roles in feudalisms are the serfs. Or should I say, my serfs. After all, I own them. This guy is mean. But this is the Middle Ages, right? They are the peasants that form the backbone of my manor. Without them, I would be nothing. But don't tell them that. Serfs are given a small piece of fief or land from the lord that they can live on. In exchange for this piece of land and protection within the manor, they must provide me, the knights, and their lord with a reliable food supply. Oh, and because I'm working my tail off to make sure that they're protected, serfs can't leave. They are forever bound to the land. Yeah, serfs sort of have it rough, but with a small piece of land, a place to call home, and free protection, what more could they want? Maybe their freedom, I don't know, right? So basically, they have to grow food and give it to everyone else because they're like, you have land, you're fine, give us all your food, right? That's kind of how it works. But that's the order, right? You have the king at the top, and then the lords are underneath them. Then you have the knights that work for the lords, and the serfs that work for like everybody else, right?
I feel like serfs is short for servant.
It's similar to servant, yes. They all serve each other though. The only person that really has it easy is the king, right?
Yep. I hate the king because he always got.
Yeah.
So if you guys think of a school, principals, the king.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The lords are the teachers.
True.
Below the lords are the knights, the aides, and below me is you. The bottom of the heap.
Oh, that's sad.
So if the principal comes to school, sees a bunch of trash outside, she's gonna call the teacher and say, Miss Jones, I need that trash picked up. Miss Jones, she's gonna pick it up.
Charlie, let him finish.
She's gonna call an aide and say, aide, go take care of that trash. I'm not gonna pick it up. So I'm gonna grab Dallin and me and Dallin are gonna go out and pick up trash. I should say I'm gonna watch Dallin pick up trash.
Yeah. Charlie, go ahead.
The king is the person that is in charge of all the schools. And those are like the principals of the schools.
It could be, yeah. You could go higher than the school, yeah.
And then the knights are all the teachers. And then the serfs are the students. That's what I
Yeah,
think.
you could go as high as that too and talk about how this. So the person in charge of all the schools that you're talking about is the superintendent. They're in charge of everybody in the district, and then they have the principals underneath them, then the teachers and all and so forth. So yeah, it could be like that too. Yeah.
So it's a total pecking order, guys. And the king owned everything in his kingdom. He owned all the land, all the animals. So if I was a lowly serf and my family was starving, if I go out in the king's forest and kill one of the king's rabbits, if I get caught, I'm probably gonna get my head chopped off or I'm going to prison.
You'll get your head chopped
I
off.
took one of the king's rabbits.
Yep. Alrighty. Let's read our next one. Life as a lord. So these are the people that are underneath the king. They own different parts of the land, and then they're in charge of the knights and some
Does
serfs.
does the king always have a right-hand man?
Probably, yeah. The king probably has a lot of people that are close to them that help them run everything, yeah.
Yeah. I don't like right-hand men because they always betray you.
They could, yeah. Alrighty, here we go. As a lord, I am not at the top of the feudal system, but I'm pretty close. Under feudalism, so feudalism, which you guys have to write a little skit on, is the system, right, that they live in. The knights, the kings, the lords, the knights, and the things. So feudalism is the order that they live in and how they run their lives, okay? So under feudalism, I rule over my fief, a smaller piece of land of the king's manor that he has given to me. I love it. I get to have my own mini kingdom, all in exchange for a small price. Most of the land in my kingdom belongs to the king. However, he has to share some with the church. After all, since God chose him to rule, it's fair to return some of the land to the church. I mean, it's common sense that God chooses our ruler. Anyone who doesn't know about the divine right theory is in for a rude awakening. If you run into a king, be sure to treat him like a god if you know what's good for you. So again, the divine right theory is when people believe that God chooses who should rule over the kingdom. So God chooses the king. Yeah. Oh yeah, you do. Sorry. There you go. Oh, there you go. Very few kings can afford to have a personal army to protect their manor. So lords, or the nobles, like me, help the king out. In fact, in the feudal system, everyone has a you do this for me and I'll do this for you type of attitude. I do a favor for someone and they do a favor for me. For example, the king gives me a piece of land called a fief to rule over as I see fit. I have almost complete control over this territory. However, in exchange, I owe the king protection in case his manor is ever invaded. I must organize an army to protect thy lordship. Some old words there. Thy. I know. You probably think I'm a servant to the king, right? Well, I kind of am. But in feudalism, everyone is a servant, except I'm not called a servant. I'm called a vassal. This is very much the same information from a different point of view, right? So let's recap so far. The king loans me a fief to rule over as I see fit. I am a vassal to the king, and in exchange for the fief or the land, I must have an army ready to go if the manor is ever attacked. Got it? Good. Yeah.
What is divine right theory?
Divine right theory is the idea that God chooses who the king should be. All right, up at the top. We lords live extravagant lives on the land. We have lavish parties, live in fabulous stone houses, or even in some cases, small castles. And we have very fine personal gardens. However, we owe the king protection since he gave us land to rule over. How do we do it, you ask? Follow this next part closely because I'm only going to say it once. It's really the same reading, but a different point of view. Well, we divide up the fief into smaller sections, which we then loan out to knights in exchange for serving in our army that protects the manor. So we lords have vassals too. The knights are our servants. The knights must be ready to fight almost instantly. It's only fair that they hold up their end of the deal, land for military service. But knights are busy. They don't have a lot of time to work on their land and grow food or do anything besides train to fight. I bet you're wondering how they, or any of us, get their food. I kind of wish it was a little bit different too, but it's okay, we're going to keep reading it. Finally, the most miserable of all roles in feudalism are the serfs, or should I say my serfs, after all I own them. Well, technically the king does, but while the fief is loaned out to me, I can order the serfs to do whatever I wish. These are the peasants that form the backbone.
Oh, that's kind of hard.
That's what they're called. These are the peasants that form the backbone of the manor. Without them, the king would have nothing, but don't tell them that. We lords give the serfs a small piece of the fief that they can live on. In exchange for this piece of land and protection within the manor, they must provide us lords, the knights, and their king with a reliable food supply. Oh, and because I'm working my tail off to make sure that they're protected, the serfs can't leave. They're forever bound to the land. Yeah, serfs kind of have it rough, but with a small piece of land, a place to call home, and free protection, what more could they want? I don't know how different the other ones are going to be. This one has a little bit of different information. We're going to read them anyway, just because why not? So, life as a knight. These are the military, basically. We all know what a middle-aged knight looks like, right? With the armor and the swords and the chainmail.
Oh,
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we know what middle-aged people look like, too. So. Yeah, Mr. Turner. Bradford? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, life as a knight. I am not at the top of the feudal system, but at least I'm not at the bottom. Under feudalism, my main responsibility is protection. Protection, protection, protection. That's all anyone wants from me. I guess when you're a trained fighter, people desperately need your services. See, all of the land in sight is controlled by one king. It's called his manor. However, the king shares some of that land with the church. Surprise. After all, since God chose him to rule, it's fair to return some of the land to the church. I mean, it's common sense that God chooses our ruler. Anyone who doesn't know about the divine right theory is in for a rude awakening. If you run into a king, be sure to treat him like a god if you know what's good for you. Very few kings can afford to have a personal army to protect their manor, so the lords or the nobles and us knights do the king a favor. In fact, in the feudal system, everyone has a you do this for me and I'll do this for you type of attitude. I do a favor for someone and they do a favor for me. For example, the king gives a lord a piece of land called a fief to rule over as he sees fit. The lord has almost complete control over his territory. However, in exchange, the lord owes the king protection in case his manor is ever invaded. Since the lord is only one person, he couldn't possibly defend against a large invader. The lord must organize an army to protect thy lordship. Because this is similar information, you could go to the slides and be working on those while I'm finishing reading these, just so you know. Because a lot of this information is being said multiple times, so you can be working on it while I'm talking, okay? I know, you probably think the Lord is a servant to the king, right? Well, he kind of is, but in feudalism, everyone is a servant, except we aren't called a servant, we are called vassals. So let's recap so far. The king loans a fief to a lord to rule however he wants to. The lord is a vassal or a servant to the king. In exchange for the fief, the lord must have an army ready to go if the manor is ever attacked. Got it so far? Good. That's where we come in. We knights are trained fighters. In fact, we knights often start out as a page or a servant to a lord. I myself left home around the time I was 7 years old to live with my wealthy relative. He was a lord, so I lived a life of luxury. Here I learned basic training with swords and armor, how to be chivalrous towards ladies, and understand my duties of how to protect the helpless and the less fortunate. The lords need people to serve in their army for the king, and we knights need a place to live as well. So here's what happens. Follow this part closely because I'm only going to say it once or 4 times. The lords divide up their fiefs into smaller sections, which are then loaned out to us knights in exchange for serving in the army that protects the manor. So the lords have vassals too. We knights are vassals to the lords, and the lords are vassals to the king.
Cool.
Again.
I think they just copy and pasted it.
And made a few edits, but that's all right. We're going to keep reading. We must be ready to fight almost immediately, or instantly. It's only fair that we hold up our end of the deal, land for military service. But we're busy. We don't have a lot of time to work on our land, grow food, or do anything besides train to fight. I bet you're wondering how we or any of us get food. Are we wondering that?
No.
Probably not. But I'm still going to read it. Finally, the most miserable of all rules in feudalisms are the serfs. Serfs are the peasants that form the backbone of the manor. Without them, the king would have nothing, but don't tell them that. The lords give the serfs a small piece of the fief that they can live on. In exchange for this piece of land and protection within the manor, serfs provide us knights, lords, and their king with a reliable food supply. Oh, and the serfs can't leave the fief. The king owns them. They're forever bound to the land. Yoshi?
Well, what happens if, like, the king dies, like, their whole bloodline or royal family dies?
I would assume that if the king dies, then God chooses another king, right?
Yeah.
But how does, I
Yeah,
don't
he
know
does.
how they figure out who's king.
That's the one right theory. They use a lot of signs and stuff. So maybe if the king died and he didn't have any heirs, maybe the next lord below him would step outside and he'd go like, "Ah, the sun is shining. That means I should be king." So they would take over the kingship. Maybe it wasn't legit, but after all, God chose it, so it's gotta be.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they saw like an eagle flying or something.
Yeah.
A lot of signs and stuff.
So there wasn't necessarily a very well thought out system for choosing a king, but if God gave them a sign, they would be king, basically. And I would assume that if there was multiple, then they would probably fight over it.
It is
Yeah.
true, actually.
Yeah.
It is true. God chooses it.
Alrighty, let's read about the poor serfs. Maybe there'll be some new information on this one because they have the worst life. Being at the bottom of the feudal system is the worst. I basically live life as a servant and have no hope to ever escape. Under feudalism, my main responsibility is to provide the food and back-breaking labor that keeps the king's manor afloat. Trust me, any of the other three roles in the feudal system is heaven compared to what I have to deal with as a serf. See, all of the land in sight is controlled by one king. It's called his manor. However, the king shares some of that land with the church. After all, since God chose him to rule, it's fair to return some of the land to the church. I mean, it's common sense around here that God chooses our ruler. Anyhow, the divine right theory is what we call it. Just treat the king like a god if you see him, and all will be good. Very few kings can afford to have a personal army to protect their manor, so wealthy nobles called lords and trained fighters called knights do the king a favor. In fact, in the feudal system, everyone has a "you do this for me and I'll do this for you" type of attitude. I do a favor for someone and they have to do a favor for me. For example, the king gives the lord a piece of land called a fief to rule over as he sees fit. The lord has almost complete control over this territory. However, in exchange, the lord owes the king protection and in case his manor is ever invaded. Since the lord is only one person, he couldn't possibly defend against a large invader. The lord must organize an army to protect thy lordship. I know, you probably think that the lord is the servant to the king, right? Well, he kind of is. But in feudalism, everyone is a servant, except we aren't called a servant, we're called a vassal. So let's recap so far. The king loans a fief to a lord to rule however he wants to. The lord is a vassal to the king, and in exchange for the fief, the lord must have an army ready to go if the manor is ever attacked. Got it so far? How are we feeling about this information? Is it sinking in? We're repeating it a lot. The more you repeat something, the more you get the idea of it, right?
Yeah.
All right. The lord needs people to serve in the army for the king, so they recruit knights to serve in their army. So here's what happens. Follow this part closely because I'm only going to say it one more time. The lords divide up their fief into smaller sections, which are then loaned out to the knights in exchange for serving in the army that protects the manor. So the lords have vassals too. The knights are vassals to the lords, and the lords are vassals to the king. And then finally, beneath the knights are us, the lowly serfs. We are the most miserable of all the roles in feudalism. We are the peasants that form the backbone of the manor. Without us, the king would have nothing. But the king and the lords give us serfs a small piece of the fief that they can live on. In exchange for this piece of land and protection within the manor, we provide the knights, lords, and our king with a reliable food supply. Oh, and the worst part is that we can't leave the fief. The king owns us. We are forever bound to the land. And who are we vassals to? Everyone. Okay, there's all the reading. A lot of reading. But use all of that stuff to fill out these couple of different things. That's why we did social studies right now, because you guys have about a half hour to kind of work through these slides, ask any questions that you need to ask, and get this part done. So slide number 1 is vocabulary. Slide number 2 talks about the hierarchy. So who is a vassal to who? And if you can find pictures, add a little bit of a picture. I'm sure you can find a picture. And then it says who is vassal to who. So the knight is a vassal or a servant to which person, and so on. So you just kind of finish out those slides. And slide number 5 is like a short little presentation or a paragraph about how feudalism works. So what's the system that they live in? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop our recording and let you guys go ahead and be working on it. If anybody online has any questions, give us a shout.